May the words of my mouth and the meditation of each of our hearts be acceptable to you this day, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. In case you didn't notice it, Friday was the first day of Women's History Month, and it seemed so fitting to be preaching on this text on the first Sunday of this month because the Samaritan woman is a wonderful example of a female worth celebrating. Now, for some of you who grew up hearing this story preached as being about a woman who was promiscuous and immoral, you may be confused by my referring to her in this way. For many people, especially in years past, the only good news found in this story was that God was so forgiving that even the sins of such a woman as this could be redeemed. But I think that there's something very different to be found in this story, and especially in this woman. First, there is nowhere in this longest conversation in the New Testament that the Samaritan is described as promiscuous. In fact, a careful reading of the story finds Jesus revealing himself as the Messiah to a fellow human being in whom he sees a spiritual hunger, an engaged mind, and the potential to be a brave preacher and evangelist. The Samaritan woman seems to me to epitomize the 2018 Women's History Month theme, nevertheless, she persisted. Here is a woman who has been so shunned by those around her that she does all that she can to be invisible. She knows the whispers that follow her because of her supposed sordid past, but she persists even though no one ever offers sympathy for her plight. She carries on knowing that in this ancient time, the authority to file for divorce rests with men alone. As a woman in the first century, she had no power in her marriages, but still was the one who was judged negatively when she was deserted by her husbands. Accepting her role, she comes along to draw water from the well in the heat of the day, rather than coming in the cool early hours when other women can be found there, carrying with her the trauma, sin, fear, or perhaps desperation that may have come from her complicated history. She hopes to come and go undetected. Yet, when a Jewish man approaches and begins to speak to her, she is stunned, but doesn't back away from the conversation. When Jesus asks her for a drink, she isn't afraid to name their differences. How is it that you, a Jew, ask a drink of me, a woman of Samaria? She asks her question guardedly, but without allowing cynicism to define her. She risks being vulnerable and responsive, even though she, like Jesus, knows that their conversation crosses cultural, religious, and societal boundaries. And when the words that he speaks reveal that he sees all of her, including her questionable past, she stands her ground and doesn't cower before the gaze of this perceptive man. In her artist statement for Living Water, Reverend Lauren Wright Pittman describes the Samaritan woman as that she needs not to be defined by the worst parts of her life, by the number of husbands or other assumptions that have been made about her, but rather she needs to be seen through the lens of mutual need as one of the first witnesses of the Messiah and as a vessel for living water herself. This is exactly what Jesus does when he comes along and sees the whole of her past, her present, and her future. He sees who she has been, what she yearns for, and where she hurts. Yet even as he names it, he does so without shaming or condemning her. Still standing her ground, she listens as Jesus describes the living water he brings. Then she boldly asks to have some of that water for herself. And when he tells her that indeed he is the Messiah for whom she awaits, she responds with such excitement that she runs back to her village, leaving her water jar behind. Arriving there, she proclaims, "Come and see a man who told me everything I have ever done." What a remarkable moment this is. Suddenly, in her exuberance to share her good news, she forgets her desire to remain anonymous and invisible. Her history, once the source of shame and secrecy, becomes the very evidence that she uses to proclaim Jesus' identity. Risking further judgment, she bravely shares her experience of Jesus, even though her faith is still forming. She doesn't try to hide the nascent nature of her devotion when she asks, "He cannot be the Messiah, can he?" Her questions become part of her evangelism as they arouse the curiosity of others, and it quickly becomes clear to those who had previously judged her harshly and had written her off that within her beats the heart of someone thirsting for God. Perhaps most important of all, Jesus honors, blesses, and validates the woman's proclamation by staying in her village for 2 days, giving an opportunity for those who hear her pronouncement to meet him directly and see that the woman is a reliable witness. John writes, "Many Samaritans from that city believed in Jesus because of the woman's testimony." There are lessons in this text for us even today if we take our time to allow the irony of this story to sink in. The Son of God appears at the well, and it is the outcast with whom no one else wants to interact who provides the water that he needs. It is the vulnerability of each of them that enables their interaction to bear fruit. How often, by contrast, do we plunge into ministry with others with a sense of self-sufficiency and condescension, hiding our weaknesses and our vulnerabilities? We enter into these interactions behaving as though what is most human and authentic about us needs to be hidden, as though we have everything to offer the other, but nothing to learn or receive from them. Jesus crosses cultural norms and breaks societal rules of the day to engage with the woman, and just as she is, we are called to put aside the stereotypes and prejudices we carry. We need to live into the truth that people are more than the sum of their political, racial, cultural, and economic differences and identities. Sometimes it takes transgressing a boundary or breaking a rule to crack through the ice and enable the living water to flow. When the Samaritan woman asks for living water, Jesus complies without holding back. We too have permission to ask for what we need. The question is not only whether we are willing to offer a drink to our neighbor in need, but will we be brave enough to ask God for help for ourselves when we are in need of it? Are we seeking in this Lenten season for what we are thirsting? Perhaps you might write your answer on the purple paper that you received as you entered this morning and put on the branch of wonder what it is for which you thirst in this season. Before Jesus concludes his conversation with the woman, The disciples appear at the well and are astonished to find Jesus speaking to her. But the Samaritan woman doesn't have time to stay and deal with their sexist notions. She has too much preaching to do to those in need of some good news. Because in the most unlikely places, through the most unexpected voices, from the minds and bodies of the disempowered and the overlooked, God speaks and living water flows. During this Lenten season, may we have ears to hear it, hearts to drink it in, and humility to honor and bless this proclamation. Amen.